Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Online Smicha. You know, in many shuls, one of the exciting parts of coming to shul for youngsters is the candy man. The one that the children behave, they daven nicely, he gives them candies. When does he give them the candies? Each candy man has his own custom. But some of them give it to them during davening, during the end of davening, even before the children hear kidush. And the question is, we know that the halachas in Shulchan Aruch is that once you daven shachris, you're not supposed to eat until you hear kidush. And if it's an older child, a katan shehigia lechinuch, old enough that he understands that he has to hear kidush, why would you be giving him candy and possibly allowing him to eat it now in a time when he should really hear Kiddush first? Now, incidentally, Derech Agav, this shaila is not only by youngsters. It is very important to remember that if you invite people, you make a function, and people who are not so tuned in with the halachas, you have to be very, very careful to make sure that they do the right thing. Because, for example, if you invite people to an event and you're not very careful that while you're feeding them, they are making brachas, or while you're feeding them, they're washing in the tilos yadayim and making birchas hamazon, which is da'iraisa, it becomes a very big problem. Because if they would have stayed home, they wouldn't, at least, at the very worst, they wouldn't transgress this halacha of eating and not making birchas hamazon. It is because of you that they ate, and you are feeding them. And if you're not insisting, or you're not telling them about the bracha and washing hamaitzi and especially birchas hamazon, in a certain level, you are meichel iser biyadayim. You're feeding them an iser in the sense that they're not supposed to be eating this without the bracha, especially without the bracha achrayna. So it is very important that we take this in seriously, and we make sure that as exciting it is for bringing in a lot of people for events and all that to be there, but if they're eating because of us, it's an inyan to make sure they make the bracha rishona as much as you're able to, and bracha achrayna, because it should not be chas v'shalom meichel iser biyadayim. So back now to the question about the candy man giving out candies, and it's a time that perhaps the kids will be eating before Kiddush. So this shaila is the status of a child, of a katan, very young, and katan shehigia lechinuch. How worried should I be if he doesn't do the right thing? So there's actually a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch, siman shin mem gimel, Hilchos Shabbos, where it talks about din katan b'Shabbos. When is it considered being meichel iser biyadayim? And one of our main concerns is that you can't train a kid, especially when he's old enough to understand, which means he's a higia lechinuch, to do something which if he becomes a little older, it's something that he's not allowed to do, because he gets into this habit to do things that are wrong. It's going to be much harder for him when he turns bar mitzvah. We don't want him to have this mindset, to be trained to do this, when in 2-3 years, it will be usher for him. But here there's halacha earlier in Hilchos Shabbos, and actually it's already mentioned in Hilchos Tefillah on a regular day's davening. In Siman Kuv Vav, Seif Gimel, the Alter Rebbe says, Ktanim shehigia lechinuch, children, youngsters that are old enough to be educated, chayavim lechancham leispalol shmayna esrei erev avayker. There is a chiyuv that you should institute, you should try hard that the children should daven shmayna esrei if they're higia lechinuch erev avayker. Now, in Hilchos Tefillah, there are loads of halachas that are connected, how the davening should be, what's the proper davening, etc., etc. Says the Alter Rebbe, fine. A certain limit, a certain obligation, we expect you to be a mechanech your child. But to put all this load of the serious part of davening, what's allowed, what's not allowed, that we will give you some wiggle room. What do I mean? The Alter Rebbe continues and says, "When we call makom rashai liten lehem lechel koidem tefillah shachris," you are allowed to give them to eat before shachris, whereas a man, it says earlier in the Shulchan Aruch, the first thing you got to do is talk to Hashem before you fill up your stomach and your hunger stuff. That's not the right way to come daven. So by a man, a regular person davening, he should daven before he eats. By a child, that halacha doesn't apply. Why? And he makes reference to the Hilchos Shabbos. Where in Hilchos Shabbos is this discussed? Is in Siman Reish Samach Tes, Seif Gimel. It talks about in the olden times, there was a public kiddush. Not only what we know today's days, we have kiddush Shabbos afternoon. Friday night, after Ma'ariv, in shul, there was a kiddush. What was the purpose of that kiddush? For the guest. Many people stayed at the shul. It was a local place to house guests traveling from city to city. So that was like the public kiddush. So in Siman Reish Samach Tes If Gimel, the Alter Rebbe says like this: HaMekadesh Beveis HaKnesses, the one who is leading the service and making kiddush Friday night. Asaloi Litem Mehakois. He's not allowed to drink that cup, even though he's making the kiddush, because the sole purpose of why he's making the kiddush is to be moitzi, the guest or the people there. Sharehu eina yoytze b'kiddusha. He is not fulfilling his obligation. Then he's going home. He's gonna make kiddush with his family. This is just for others. So you cannot take a drink before you take care of your own obligation of your own kiddush. So how would this kiddush be rated as a kosher kiddush if nobody is drinking? Says the Alter Rebbe, Keitzad Yaseh, what should you do that he's making a bar pri hagafen, somebody has to drink? Yatim mehakois lahakotan. You call over a youngster, and a youngster you give him to drink. So you made a bar pri hagafen, and the youngster is drinking. Now what's the deal? The youngster is allowed to break the Shulchan Aruch. The youngster is also going home and having his meal there. This is not a kiddush for him. Explains the Alter Rebbe that there is a difference. There's a guideline what you're allowed to do with a cotton and what you're usher. And to make a long story short, the Alter Rebbe categorizes it like this: there are two types of isurim. There's one isur like treifa. In its essence, it's usher. Any time of the day, any time of the year, treifas, nevela, treifas, whatever, chazer, are all usher. That you're never allowed to be meichel for a cotton, to a cotton which is hagiel lechinuch. We don't want him to grow up with that feeling, that taste, etc. But something which is mutter to eat is mutter. However, it's the timing that's off. For example, in this case, it's only because you didn't hear kiddush yet. Your kiddush will be a little later. That a cotton that you're allowed to give to drink. And this is an negeya also to Hilchos Yom Kippur, why sometimes you could be easy on a cotton allowing him to eat, because for the same reason. The eating in general is not, the type of food that he's eating is not prohibited. It's just the timing. And in such a case, it could be easier. Uvachein, so the poskim are summarized that today, concerning the candy man. Yes, you shouldn't definitely push it into the mouth. That would be Michael Biyadayim. Especially if you're giving it to him and you don't even know. He might even wait to after Kiddush. And even if he waits, even if he doesn't wait and he eats the candy right away, again, it's a kosher food item that's in the wrong time. In such a case, there's no Isser allowing a kid to eat that. Shikoyach, and please join us again next week.